Is this the best value Mac laptop right now after Apple released the M1 MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro and Max chips? Yes, that's a question mark. And here's my review after 1 year or so of using it. Let's go! First, let's talk about the build quality. Apple has been making well-built Macs for years, and this 2020 M1 MacBook Air is no exception. Although this one still has the old design, but I don't really mind it at all. It's very portable. Yes, it's easier to carry and not too heavy. It has a decent sized screen, although I would prefer a much bigger LCD screen for video editing. But now after using this for a year and have gotten used to it already. Next is the keyboard. Finally, Apple in my opinion did it right this time by using a scissor mechanism, which is really nice to the feel, and I like the response when pressing the keys. So far, and since I had this Mac, the keys work and never had any issues with them at all. Moving on now with the performance. I would say I do a lot, if not all of my stuff with this 2020 M1 MacBook Air, from doing scripts for my talking head videos like this one, to browsing the web, to checking emails, and just use it for everyday use. It's amazing when editing 1080p footage, and it's great for 4K as well. But why only great in 4K? Well, it is because it struggles a bit if you're editing multicam clips, most especially if you have 4 to 5 layers of video, and I experienced that it's lagging too when editing Sony clips, particularly with my Sony ZV-1. And for some reason, the video files from my Sony ZV-1 is harder to work with than the Panasonic ones. And that's my experience in having been a user of Panasonic cameras for a very long time. Yes, the Lumix clips are always easy to manage and edit, and always been the case since owning the GH cameras years ago, starting with the GH2 and now with the GH6 right now filming me, even in 5.7K in 420 codec and in MOV format. Anyway, and also before I forget, and in my testing, the only way to achieve a smooth edit is to have a 16 gig memory installed on your 2020 M1 MacBook Air. 8 gig won't cut it, unfortunately. Well, yes, it can for some 1080p footage, but sooner or later, it will struggle, and most especially if you're planning to do a lot of 4K video editing later on. In my testing and having this for a year now, that it's a must to have a 16 gig of memory installed. For the ProRes clips, I haven't tried it yet with this Mac since I don't have yet the CF Express Type B card to test it out. This Mac always worked and never had an issue. Even heating issues is non-existent, and I have been getting a lot of questions about it, and since I have this D-brand skin installed, and yes, with this D-brand, it works all the time and no heat issues or whatsoever. I even have another hard case on top of the skin. Yeah, isn't that crazy? And no heat issues as well. And the case that I'm talking about is the Under brand. If you want to check out my review, click the link right here. Next is connectivity. This 2020 M1 MacBook Air has 2 USB-C ports, and the first port right here on the left is the Thunderbolt or USB 4, which is an ultra-high bandwidth and can accommodate up to 40 gig. Mind you, 40 gig per second of data transfer, and that is fast. This is also the port to use for charging to get that battery filled up. Although the second port can be used for charging as well, it's not as fast as the main port right here. You can also hook up a monitor up to 6K resolution, which is more than enough for my needs. Yes, for my 4K and 5.7K video editing. This other USB-C port can be used to plug in a hard drive and other accessories. But I just wish that this has 2 additional USB-C ports on the right side here, plus an SD card slot at the very least to prevent using dongles, USB hubs, and other adapters, since this is a portable machine and will make it not so portable anymore if we have a bunch of accessories plugged into the USB-C ports. Yeah, wishful thinking on my part, but hopefully in the next iteration, and I also think that this would be the last wedge shape shaped Mac and will now have the same design as the new M1 MacBook Pros but just smaller. I really like the new design of the MacBook Pros a lot, and it'd be really nice if the new MacBook Airs will have that too, since they can put more USB-C ports this time around. But still, that's just my guess, and who knows if it will be a reality. Also, I would understand the lack of a full-size HDMI port since, as you can see this one is tiny. There's really no place for the full-size HDMI. Next is value for money. Yes, Macs are so expensive, but I would say this one in particular is worth every penny. In my opinion, you're actually saving more since Macs are still usable, even if it's 10 years old or even more. And I can vouch for it having a MacBook Pro. Although, of course, the performance will decrease as well as battery life over time, and you can no longer use it for heavy tasks. So yes, as for the 2020 MacBook Air, you will get your money's worth. Although there's a lot of great things about this Mac, there are drawbacks too. I have mentioned this in my previous 4K video editing review last year, and if you want to see that review, click the link right here. So yeah, drawback number 1 is this trackpad right here, which is so sensitive. A slight move of your fingers and whatever you are looking at will zoom in and is so annoying. Yes, it happens most of the time when browsing. Let me know in the comment section below if you're experiencing the same thing. Maybe it's just my Mac and that I don't know. I have already updated this to the latest firmware and still the same issue. Next drawback is the charger, which is not a MagSafe one, whereas the new M1 MacBook Pros have them now, It would be nice if this is the first Mac to have it after Apple stopped doing it for years. Although, not a deal breaker for me since I always have this near a power outlet, and tripping the charger cable is not an issue at all. Third drawback is the screen brightness. It could be brighter, but I guess that's just how it is with this device. At least 2 notches additional when you press this brightness button. I do a lot of video editing on this Mac, and sometimes I really have to get closer to the screen just to see what I'm editing. But at night, when it's full blast, I had no problems with it at all. Again, a small annoyance and not too big of a deal. Or maybe it's just my eyes, Who knows? And for the fourth drawback, which is the built-in FaceTime HD camera. OMG. Wow, it's still using 720p, and Apple had been giving us 720p cameras for years. Even though 1080p now is the standard or now the lowest resolution among webcams, DSLRs, and smartphones. I don't know the reason behind it, but I would say it's just like buying a car. It's just like buying a car year after year that there's a minimal hardware upgrade. And camera on this 2020 M1 MacBook Air is no exception. Well, they have improved it though through software, but it isn't enough. And now, we are seeing 1080p cameras being used on the new MacBook Pros and the newly announced display alongside the Mac Studio, which is simply called Studio Display, and it's a 27-inch 5K resolution, which has a 12 megapixels ultra-wide camera with center stage too, They didn't mention though if it's 1080p, but still it's an improvement from that 720p resolution that this M1 MacBook Air has. Alright, last drawback that I can think of is that the battery drains so fast, and most especially if you are editing. I get about 3 hours on a full charge when editing 4K videos, and the other problem that I've been experiencing from time to time is that when a hard drive is plugged in overnight and you don't turn off the Mac, it will for sure drain the battery. And then when you're ready to work on something the next day, the battery is almost empty. Not big of a deal since you can just plug the charger and call it a day, but still it drains the battery so quickly. So I always have to quit Final Cut Pro, eject the hard drive, and unplug it, and then let the Mac go to sleep. Sometimes I forget to unplug the hard drive, so it's a bit annoying when that happens. Other than the drawbacks mentioned, I don't see any other reasons why you won't pick this up if you're looking for a portable laptop and it's a Mac, and that can do a lot of stuff. Just make sure though to get the 16GB of memory for you to be able to edit in 4K smoothly. Yes, for 1 to 2 layers of 4K video, then you're set. Overall, this is still the best value Mac laptop in my opinion compared to the lineup that Apple released recently, which is the newly redesigned M1 MacBook Pros with M1 Pro and Max chips. This is my workhorse for everything. You can still use this 2020 M1 MacBook Air for productivity, for music production, and even 4K video editing. It is that good and I love it. It never lets me down and you can't go wrong with it. A truly amazing computer for sure. So, if you're looking for your first Mac laptop or you have a certain budget for a laptop computer, then this 2020 M1 MacBook Air is still worth considering. So, how about you? What is your take about this 1 year later review? And would you go for an M1 MacBook Pro instead, huh? With at least the M1 Pro chip, or you'll max it out and get the M1 Max and all the good stuff. As they say, go big or go home. Would you do that? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and let's discuss. Alright, so as always, give it a like if you ever find this video helpful. Then subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And while you're at it, click that notification bell icon to be notified with more awesome videos. This is Bernie. Until the next video, goodbye for now. Next is the keyboard. And finally, Apple, in my opinion, did it right this time by using a scissor mechanism keyboard.